Thank you for moving up. Yeah. As a law enforcement, we don't get ever sit there. Yeah. I always have to say, no, I can't be there. Marion County Quorum Court meeting, April 8, 2025, now in session. Clerk of office, please call roll.
Justice Officer.
Here.
Justice Lee. Here. Justice Watson.
Here.
Justice Jensen.
Here.
Justice Reed.
Here.
Justice Kirkwood. Here. Justice Shipman.
Here.
Justice Dorsey.
Here.
Justice Johnson.
Here. Wonderful, we have a quorum. Please stand for prayer and stay plain. Stay for the pledge. Sheriff Alexander.
Lord, we thank you for this beautiful day that you blessed us with. We thank you for the wonderful rain that you sent, Lord. We thank you for each one here and ask a blessing on them and their families. We ask that you go with us throughout the night doing the county's business. Have us to do the business that you'd have us to do, Lord, and make it be a blessing to you. Lord, go with us, lead, guide, direct us, forgive us where we failed. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all very much. Do I have a motion to accept the minutes? Motion. You got a motion, I have a second.
Before we do that, I have a question on the budget minutes. Do I need to do that now or give it to?
Say again, sir.
I have a correction in the budget committee meeting.
Budget meeting that we had this month,
Yes.
not for the meetings, not for the minutes from the report from last session.
Correct.
All right, well, when we get to budget, we will take care of that there. I've got a motion and a second to accept the minutes. Any corrections or additions? All those in favor? All opposed, like sign? Quarterly treasurer's reports.
Total balance of all funds at the end of March, 9.26 million. We're running pretty steady. The report says we're down 6.7%. However, when you take out the federal funding, on the second page in your packet, we're down less than 1%. Road department, of course, with all the expenditures that we've had on the Mother Nature disasters, they're down a bit. Sales tax revenue, we're doing okay on sales tax revenue. I know statewide, Governor Sanders had published that we were down. That really hasn't affected us here.
Wonderful.
We're down from the month of February for whatever reason, but overall for the first quarter, we're still up 3%. I'm sorry. For March, we're still up 3%, and for the quarter, we're still up almost 5%, 4.91%. Is there anything else you guys need me to summarize in questions?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes. Mr. Hudson, Planning Commission.
Nothing to report at this time on the planning.
Thank you, sir. Budget Committee.
Nothing, Judge. Do have a question. So it's going to be Justice Lee did not, it wasn't unanimous on the pay raise. I missed that.
Okay.
She voted against it.
I believe that's been corrected.
That has been corrected.
Okay, wonderful.
Do I need to do it?
No, I believe it's already been corrected. And reported.
Get corrected on the ordinance, but yes, it would be nice if I got the corrected minutes.
No, correct, yes, yes, ma'am. So thank you. Justice Dorsey. Anything to add to the budget committee?
No, sir.
All right.
No, Judge.
Personnel committee.
My minutes stand as presented.
Thank you very much. The law enforcement committee meet as well, correct? No? All right. It's all wasted on meetings. Procedures management has not met. Do we have any more unfinished business? Before we get to the new business, I would like to say thank you to Marion County for the patience with our third 100-year flood in less than 6 months. It is trying for a Class 2 revenue county to keep up with this at this time. So I appreciate all the ones like Sheriff Alexander, they're praying for rain, just pray for it in small increments going forward. But be patient with my guys. They are doing great. They came in all day Sunday. We're getting there. Right now, we're just clearing paths and ways. We'll come back and redo everything again as we have the opportunity. But again, I thank you for your patience. And if you see them, give them a wave and tip your cap to them, because they're doing a heck of a job for us.
Amen.
Clerk Bonkin, new business.
I would entertain a motion to read by title only.
Second.
Who seconded that? All in favor? All opposed? Going to the appropriation ordinance 2025-13. This appropriation is for the transfer of funds to cover the cost of insurance for buildings and risk management. There was an increase in anticipated cost in the amount of $502.94.
Second.
Any discussion? Justice Van Valkenburg,
Yes.
Justice Lee,
Yes.
Justice Hobson,
Yes.
Justice Jensen,
Yes.
Justice Reed,
Yes.
Justice Kerwood,
Yes.
Justice Shipman.
Yes.
Justice Dorsey.
Yes.
Justice Johnson.
Yes.
Thank you. Ordinance 25-14. This is the transfer of unappropriated funds from the motor fuel tax fund for the payment of asphalt overlay on the Marion County Court Complex rear parking lot in the amount of $31,350.
Motion. Second.
Is there any discussion? Justice Lee,
Yes.
Justice Hobson,
Yes.
Justice Jensen,
Yes.
Justice Reed,
Yes.
Justice Kerwood,
Yes.
Justice Shipman,
Yes.
Justice Dorsey,
Yes.
Justice Johnson,
Yes.
Justice Van Valkenburg.
Yes.
Ordinance 25-15, transfer unappropriated funds from the county buildings improvement fund for the construction of the security fence and the automatic gate for the Marion County Court Complex.
I'll motion. Second.
I'm sorry.
I'll motion. Second.
Is there any discussion? Justice Hobson,
Yes.
Justice Jensen,
Yes.
Justice Reed,
Yes.
Justice Kerwood,
Yes.
Justice Shipman,
Yes.
Justice Dorsey,
Yes.
Justice Johnson,
Yes.
Justice Van Valkenburg,
Yes.
Justice Lee.
Yes.
Thank you. Ordinance 25-16, amending the operating budget, numbers and compensation for the sheriff's department for the Detention Center, the Sheriff's Department, 911, E911 dispatch, and establishes a pay schedule for the Marion County Law Enforcement Center.
Second.
Discussion?
What is this about?
It's the Justice Johnson,
Yes.
Justice Reed,
Yes.
Justice Kerwood,
Yes.
Justice Shipman,
Yes.
Justice Dorsey,
Yes.
Justice Johnson,
Yes.
Justice Van Valkenburg,
Yes.
Justice Lee,
Yes.
Justice Hudson.
Yes.
Thank you. Ordinance 2517. This is for the amendment for the budget increases for the Marion County elected officials pursuant to the Marion County Budget and Workers' Compensation Ordinance 2024-61.
Second.
Discussion? Justice Reed,
Yes.
Justice Kerwood,
Yes.
Justice Shipman,
Yes.
Justice Dorsey,
Yes.
Justice Johnson,
Yes.
Justice Van Valkenburg,
Yes.
Justice Lee,
No.
Justice Hobson,
Yes.
Justice Jensen.
No.
Motion passed. Thank you. That's all I have, Judge.
Thank you. I don't have any appointments at this time, and no one's on the docket for announcements, so at this time, I will turn it over to Marie Thompson and our Army of Blue, and we will go from there.
First of all, thank you all very much for allowing us to come in this evening. I was told we had 45 minutes, so we will keep it under 45 minutes. And thank you, Army of Blue, for coming out tonight.
Oh, we're great.
Whether it was 4 or 5.
First half is for the red.
For those of you who don't know me, I'm Travis Dozier. I'm a chairman of Marion County Community Services. We are a 501c3 organization. We have been around for about 20 years, and the last 15 years have been spent pretty much directly working on the community center for our county. What we're proposing is a public-private partnership with Marion County to build, operate, and maintain a community center. Benefits of community center are many, but most notably, they promote good health, boost local economies, boost property values, keep kids safe, provide needed meeting space, but probably most important is they make Marion County a very attractive place to come and live and raise a family. We've been provided with our business plan. We've gotten our budget. What we're asking is for your approval, one court's approval, to allow us to move forward with a continuation of the 1/2 cent capital improvement sales tax and a 1/4 cent sales tax for maintenance and operation. We brought together several folks here. Sorry, Tim. Okay. Joe. They're gonna help explain how this would all work. And, of course, you're welcome to ask me any questions that you have. I speak for him when I say that. But, they're gonna let us know how this can help us get to that point. So, first up, our attorneys. Sarah Giamo, did I say that right? Sarah Giamo, she is a partner in public finance practice group of Friday, Hubbard and Clark law firm, and our local attorney is Sam Payson. So I will let them go next.
I've spoken in front of this group before. You guys have probably heard enough from me, but I just will stand by what Travis had to say. When this project started, I didn't have any children. Now I have two. One's going to be 21 and she's going to graduate college. It's a testament to the securitiveness of this group and the sheer number of people wearing blue before Easter to come before this group and say, hey, we need your help in order to better our community. Wes Henderson's here from the Double School. I was talking to Kelvin Hudson from the Flippin School. One thing they'll tell you is that this is a project that is needed for this area. Now, as far as numbers and such, this is why I practice law. I'm not familiar with those, but our friends in the finance world can probably take some questions from there.
Do you have anything that you want to add to that?
So, hi, thank you for having me. My name is Sarah Giamo. I would actually represent the county in this endeavor if you all chose to move forward with it. I can talk about, I think I would prefer to answer questions that you guys have, but I can talk about the sales taxes that the county currently has or how this arrangement might legally work for the sales tax election process.
Thank you, Sam. Next up, to explain the proposed sales tax and the financing, we have Jason Holzbaum, who is Senior Vice President at Stevens Public Finance.
Judge, court, members of the court. My name is Jason Holzbaum, a Senior VP with Stevens Inc. First, I want to thank you for putting your trust in us in the past years in terms of doing your financing. If you remember, Stevens was involved in your jail financing recently. And what I wanted to do is just kind of give you an update on that financing, kind of where you are in terms of the sales tax collections, and I brought some presentation materials. Back in 2017, the county passed that sales tax, and basically it was 3/4 cent tax. 1/2 cent of that went to the bond tax, or the first bond tax, which helped finance the project, and then 1/4 cent went for law enforcement purposes. I'm happy to report at the time when we did that transaction, we were expecting that to pay off in around 2029. We're now estimating because of your growth in your sales tax, that's probably going to pay off as soon as the first quarter of next year, 2026. So testament to just the growth that's going on within your community. The presentation materials, Judge.
Thank you, sir.
What you look, if you see on page 3, you'll see the growth since 2019. We just took a snapshot of that, of the 1/2 cent sales tax. An annual sales tax collection you'll see in 2019 was approximately $850,000. You'll see over the last 5 years, part of this has to do with the internet sales tax coming on, but also to probably COVID attributed to this as well. But you'll see now that you have, as of 2024, total collections of approximately $1.2 million. So there's grown that much. And the way that tax was structured is any excess revenues or any excess collections would go to pay that off more quickly. And as I alluded to, we're estimating now, based on these collections, that you pay off sometime in the first quarter of 2026. So that brings us to kind of this discussion today. And I am just here as an informational item for you to kind of talk about this tax, answer any questions that you might have. But I believe what we're proposing to do for this particular facility, and you'll see there's some options available to you, but just what we would propose to do is repurpose the 1/2 cent sales tax because it is about to pay off. Use that 1/2 cent sales tax to support the new facility and then add a 1/4 cent tax on there for maintenance and operations. So in all, we have a very similar structure to what you did back in 2017 related to the jail project. When you look at the next couple of pages within this presentation, there's a couple different financing options for you. And when you get into this, working with your engineers and your contractors, et cetera, we're going to say, this is what this particular tax would generate for you in terms of project funds. Right now, based on a 25-year amortization, you would see it would be about $14.9 million. Again, we're structuring this in a way that if growth continues, that would pay off more quickly than the stated maturity of 25 years. So if you use kind of a similar example, the last transaction you did went out about 18 years was the total, but again, we're paying off much more quickly than that. So we would structure it very similarly to how you see it here today. So again, I'm here, just as Ms. Giamo said, to answer any questions you might have about the financing structure. But what we wanted to provide for you too, just kind of given the timing of this, is kind of what this would look like as it relates to kind of how this would be financed going forward with the existing half-cent sales tax that you have available to you. In the back of this, you'll see a preliminary timeline. There's nothing magical about these dates. We just wanted to give you a sense of next steps and what would be involved. And I will admit, the laws are changing because legislative session is happening right now, but there is some questions about when elections will be held. My understanding is if everything goes as it's been proposed and it's been adopted, you will not have, just like you've had before, you'll have 2 elections, but rather than be in May for the primary, that will move to permanently being in March. So you would have a March and you would have a November election going forward. So in general, you would need to have everything to the county. Everything would need to be available and all the documents there at least 70 days prior to that. So kind of work your way back. If you did suspend the rules, you had 3 separate readings of an ordinance, et cetera, you kind of get a sense of what that timing would look like as it relates to that. So let me stop there and see if you have any questions about the financing or the numbers themselves, or even the current tax and how that's operating.
Judge, if I may ask a question,
Yes, sir, please.
maybe unfair, I should have got here earlier and asked you, but I think it might be helpful to have a discussion as to what the county can levy. VCD is limited to just 1 cent. Can a person go beyond 1 cent? Because right now we're talking about 50 and a quarter, 3/4 of a cent. Maybe an explanation on that could be helpful.
That's great. And that is a legal question that I will turn over to Ms. Giamma.
Thanks. Thank you, Jason. So currently, the county is levying a 1 cent sales tax. I know there's a few purposes that y'all have dedicated that to, but it's just a general tax. You also have the 1/4 cent that's allocated towards the operation and maintenance of the jail, and then you have a 1/2 cent, which can only be used to pay down debt, and it's levied under a different statute. So the proposal that you all are discussing would entail another 1/2 cent, or if you can imagine it, like a continuation of the 1/2 cent under that could only be used to pay debt service on the bonds, and then another 1/4 cent under, it doesn't matter to you, but 2674 200. So you have the total authority you have under that statute is 2 5/8 cents. So you have plenty of room to do everything that you're discussing. And I'm not if I bring up what the what you all are thinking about doing.
Of course, yes.
Okay.
No, they're aware.
Okay, so the judge and the sheriff are also discussing using that 1/2 cent sales tax, although it would be a new tax levied under, because the statutes are different, levying a tax for jail and law enforcement purposes to cover the cost of operating and maintaining the jail in addition to the 1/4 cent tax. And you could legally do everything that both groups are proposing if the court were interested in that. Does that make sense? Okay.
Well, you could legally do that. I need permission before I speak.
No, you're all right.
You can legally do that if you're talking about keeping the 1/2 cent for the county jail and then an additional 1/2 cent for the community center. Is that what you're saying?
If both proposals were moved forward with, if the Quorum Court, if the county decided to move forward with both proposals, that would be an additional 3/4 cent. So right now you're levying 1 3/4, so it would be 2 1/2.
So the county jail stays like that, 1/2 cent, 1/4, and then we'll have another.
That's correct.
Okay, so this isn't like taking away the 1/2 from the county jail, you
would not be taken away from.
Just have, just another option where the half cent would take away from the jail, if they would be in the center. I know that's not, I don't think it's getting that, but that's what I'm getting. Just kind of punching the numbers in my head right there. So it's two separate.
It would be, so do you want to know what it would look like on the ballot? I'm not sure how to answer your question exactly.
Well, apparently it would be two separate. You're reinstating the county jail. That would be on one part of the ballot, and the community center, that would be on another ordinance on the ballot.
So it would be, so for both proposals to move forward, it would be 3 questions on the ballot.
Summarize those.
So there would be a question to levy a new half-cent tax for operation and maintenance of the jail or jail law enforcement purposes. There would be a bond question for the 1/2 cent. And then there would be a 1/4 cent operation and maintenance of the community center. So that would be 3 separate questions.
I miss it, there's a quarter missing. Currently, there's a quarter on the jail operation.
You will leave that alone. We don't do anything with that. Nope, just leave that be. Yeah, it's a permanent tax. Nothing needs to be done with that.
It's not sunset.
That's correct. Did that help or?
Yeah, I think that's like that. So it puts it for a vote of people, basically speaking on the side.
Yes, sir.
Probably one of the most looming questions I have is, can a 501c3 benefit from public tax money?
So there's a couple of ways that this could work. Okay, there's a constitutional prohibition against a county having an interest in a private entity, which includes nonprofits, and there's also a constitutional provision against lending the county's credit. But you can contract for services. So you could have a community center. It's almost like, imagine like you could have a community center and have a management contract with them. So the county is authorized to have a contract for services that the county could otherwise provide. Does that make sense?
Sort of.
So it's the county's building, the county owns it, the county, but you just contract with someone for the management.
The county would own the community.
Yes, and no, in all scenarios, the county would own the community center. The other option would be a lease. So the county would own the building, finance the construction of the building, and then you would lease it to a 501c3. And that arrangement is pretty common in the state with hospitals. So a county-owned hospital building that is then leased to a 501c3. But the county sales tax money in that situation, in terms of operating and maintaining, you can use that sales tax for building purposes, but the sales tax could not be used to pay 501c3 employee salaries. Does that make sense?
So is it reasonable to expect that the bond issue that the community center has, the county has a $14 million liability?
That's correct. It would be the county's bonds, the county bond issue.
Thank you.
Yes.
Good question.
So we would own the building, not the property.
No, you would own the property too. It's the county's property, the county's building, but you just have someone coming in to operate, manage it.
If they would buy the property. I thought the property was owned.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know the answer to that question. Sorry. In my head, that's how it was gonna work. I see.
So, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
We own the land, and what we've been told previously that that the property that the building will sit on has to be owned or at least leased by the county. So in other words, it has to be there, but it's just that the building sits on. Judge, not the whole. Sorry, go ahead, no, go ahead, please.
2 examples, the shirt factory building is owned by us, owned by the county. Escapes me who's there, Steve Welch Bunch is leasing that. They bought the lease from Marback. The county owns that building. The county owns Butterball, owns the land that the Butterball plant sits. This is how it was financed when they did the financing several years ago. So it's a similar sort of situation.
But am I correct in saying that was payment in lieu of taxes for Butterball? Is that a pilot program?
I think there was some involvement with that, but in essence, and I'm talking to Sarah here because it was financed with ghost bonds. She'll know what that term means. And
Yeah, industrial development.
Right,
correct.
Sorry.
So, go ahead, what were,
No, I'm just gonna ask you to clarify. It was my understanding from our previous discussions legally that we would have the option to lease that land to them, like a 99-year contract, for $1 or something
okay,
like that.
okay, I see what you're saying, sorry, and I didn't know that. Could you go back?
Judge,
Yes, sir.
in order for the county to take sales tax money from bonds, the county would have to own that property and the county would soon assume all liability for it. Yes, you could lease it out, but the structure of the bonds for the financing package, the county, and my recommendation would have to be in hook, line, and sinker. And then they could lease out the management to the community folks for the operation. As council said, the public credit, doing this is prohibited by Article 12 of the Arkansas Constitution. However, as I've explained to the Quorum Court, you could do contracts. So for example, in recent history, we've done the contracts for like the School of New Hope, the fire departments.
Yes.
We can do the same thing with the community center. However, the ownership would have to transfer in its current present shape and form. It'd have to be, my recommendation would be the entire thing would be deeded over to the county if the county's going to go into debt for this much money.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. Which lends the question, does the county have sufficient bond rating to float a $14 million bond?
That's probably me, right? Yes, sir, they do. And so keep in mind, it is the county's obligation under this structure that we're talking about. Be mindful that it's secured by your sales tax revenue, by the patrons and the residents of the county obviously paying that sales tax. So just like your jail financing was well received by investors, we assume because it is a county-wide sales tax, that is what's supporting us, regardless of what the project is, that's the security. And I'll give you another example. I was part of the financing for a county-wide hospital, county hospital. That hospital has not necessarily been the best revenue producing facility, but the sales tax to support building that is solid. So that facility is state of the art, brand new, it's sitting there, and it's good, it's secure. So investors like that because they see your tax collections, they see the history of that, and it lends itself to a good credit that they would want to buy. So that's a long-winded answer to your question, but yes, you guys have the sales tax capacity and the credit to do that. Okay.
Thank you. Okay. So the community center, you're fine.
Okay.
Oh,
sorry.
So the community center who owns that property, what was the purchase price of that? It was 25 acres, I believe. Okay, what was the purchase price?
100,000.
How much?
100,000.
100,000. Okay. So if the county has to take over the property, are they going to sell? Is the county going to have to buy that property?
Now, that's a question for these folks here. We were told, and we would rather not sell the entire property because we have plans to offer other county services a location there too. But I think these folks would have to tell us whether or not we would have to sell you the entire property or we would simply sell you the land that the building would be on. I don't know the answer to that. Do you guys?
I don't,
I think what Mr. Russo said would be the way to do this.
To sell the whole land?
It'd be my one.
yes, what Russo was saying is, does it have to be done? No, but in the best interest of Marion County, when you mentioned hook, line, and sinker, if we were going to go all in for this, the county would want to own the property, yes.
And Judge, if I may, and I've learned not to speak for John, I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but what I'm hearing you say is that the county's in for a penny, in for a pound, that the community center folks, and we operate it like we did the nursing home. We have a board to run it, but the county still has some say. If the board says, hey, we want to offer X, as long as there's money to do it, county's good with it. If not, county says, maybe not. Is that
Yeah, can I elaborate and give an example? Please. Years ago, in Citrus County, Florida, they built a new 400-bed jail. The Quorum Court decided that they were going to privatize it and hand it over to a private corporation. They did a lease, the county still owns the building, but the new management company comes in and takes over, okay? The management company decides that they want to expand the facility. And they tell the county, we're going to make an investment to take the jail from 400 beds to 750 beds and build an infirmary, and it's not going to cost the county a dime. We would like permission to do this. Of course, the Quorum Court said yes, they did that. The private corporation has got contracts with the feds, and basically they were able to finance the entire package, so their revenue stream has increased dramatically, okay? It would be a similar situation here with the community center. If the organization is managing it, and let's say the county's got the whole property and it's dedicated for the purposes of the community center, and the community center says, we want to put in a pool, or we want to put in a lazy river, or we want to put in courts, okay? There's going to have to be a way to pay for that. And the problem is with just giving the county the property for the building itself, we're going to make a $14 million investment on $25,000 of property. That wouldn't be my recommendation. But if everybody's under the understanding that we're going to take the entire parcel, but we are going to continue to work with the community center so they have further projects in development, then great. Because one of the things that in recent discussions that was talked about with the current library board was potentially moving the county library out there, which if the county owns the building, okay, then we could put the library there, have complete access, and we're going to be responsible for maintenance, insurance, and things along those lines. It only makes sense. But to limit the investment that the county's going to make of $14 million, that's a problem if we don't own all the property.
Thank you, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I would like to say that we've got 15 years of working on this, and if we went this route, and we would want some assurances from the county that we would have some say-so in the long-term development of the property. It's important, because we've been telling the people in the county that the building not only is a building, but it is the first domino we push over to expand services to the people. So it's more than just the building. It's about infrastructure. It's about being able to write grants and to mobilize our economic base in this county, to work with businesses. We've got plans that the building is just the foundation for, and we've talked to a number of board members about this. So I just want you to be aware of that if we were to work that out, we would want something in writing to say, we want to continue to develop.
Your attorneys at Friday and Eldridge and Clark, and I've got some classmates that work there, are very, very good at drafting leases and management contracts that specifically spell that out, okay? And that's one of the things about a management contract, because if you look at, for example, look at a lot of hotels throughout southern Missouri and northern Arkansas, they are operated by management companies that have full reign to do a tremendous amount of things. Under the contract provisions in the statute under Arkansas law, once the county signs the contract for the 501c3 to operate the facility and provide these services, and the Office of Legislative Audit is going to require that, then all the specific things that you want protections on, that's where it's put into the lease, and all that is spelled out as safeguards in the lease. Because as the leaseholder, if you will, or the management company, whichever form that takes, it could be either one, and understand a management contract and a lease are totally separate things, okay? So depending on which form it takes, matters not to me. It's going to matter to the Quorum Court, and it's going to matter to your attorneys. But whatever form that takes, every bit of that can be spelled out either way, okay?
Sounds good.
With that,
that happens like that, and I agree with Marie, that they need to be able to have that right. If I am for the community center, I'll be for out there, okay? And I like the idea of the library moving out there, as I said, the building, et cetera, et cetera. I think when I looked at, that is an asset. Now, moving along, the thing I want to be sure of is that if that's what the county has everything, the property, the building like that, and the community center's running it, okay, who's making decisions about the financing, the money coming in, distribution of funds, whatever? Is it going to be up to them, or do they, and I'm sure it is, but are they going to have to come to the county and say, hey, can we do this? Or is it all going to be independent on there? There's going to be a point there where, and I'm not trying to brag, but from everything I've learned when I was in the military, handling $1 million contracts and all this stuff right there, you better make sure that everybody's on the same sheet of music as to who can do what and who cannot do it. So somewhere down the line, and like I've said another time before, I'm trying to get all the information I can because I don't want to have what I call a John Wayne moment. So, I'll tell you one of these days what a John Wayne moment is. So I don't have time here. So that's the only thing right now that's also popped up that's kind of concerning me is, are they going to have, I wouldn't say, they can't have total control because you can't push the county out. But at the same time, they got to be able to function. Okay.
From a dollar and cent standpoint, I don't think that we, as your banker, care how you structure that. I mean, legally speaking, and we'll talk about the legalities of that in a second. But what I would tell you is, just like with your jail bonds, you would have a trustee that is set up that basically manages your funds on your behalf, the sales tax revenue. So again, from my perspective, all we're looking at is the sales tax revenues. Okay, so this is all obviously negotiations and discussions that have to be had between all parties. And from a dollar and cent standpoint, the sales tax money, again, we all go to the store, we pay the money, and it goes to the treasurer, who then sends it to the trustee, who is a local bank or a banking institution, and they will manage that money on your behalf. So think about it, it's almost like a checking balance. You have a party in place to make sure that money flows the way it should. So you as a quorum court, how you should set that up, and again, it's a more legal question, would have control of your budget processes and all, and how those money will flow out. But they'll be managed by a third party, so you wouldn't necessarily have to worry about where those money would go. From a financing standpoint, as you can imagine, we want financing to be paid first. So if you had $100, the payment $75, we want you to have $75 paid first, and then whatever is left over would then flow back to either whatever arrangement that you made up. And that money would flow from the trustee back to the county or to the facility. So hopefully that answers your question. Yeah, I try to answer it.
But hey, no,
I appreciate it. Yeah, thank you.
So this is a good discussion, and we would have to, I'm gonna echo Mr. Holscott and say that, this is something that y'all need to help negotiate on the front end, because it raises some issues to me. I'm not saying you can't necessarily do what you're thinking of, but in terms of tax, the sales tax, we can only use sales tax collections for the purposes that are approved by the voters. So if the voters approve, let's say the $0.25 for operation and maintenance of the community center, that's the only thing it can be used for. So you can't then be using sales tax collections to operate and maintain a library. Okay, that's not the purpose of the approved by the voters. So just keep that in mind when you're thinking building on to the community center or adding other things. That sales tax money can't necessarily be used for that. Another thing to keep in mind is that we need to use public funds for public purposes. So that's something else that we need to keep in mind. And then from a bond financing perspective, some of the things that y'all are discussing makes me think the example that you brought up, Mr. Rousseau, this would come into play if you issue bonds, you can issue them on a tax exempt basis, and that gives you the benefit of a lower interest rate. But in order to get that benefit from the federal government, from the IRS, there are rules that you have to comply with. And so you can't just be making contracts with anyone you want, any way you want. You got to fit in with certain parameters. So we can do it on a tax exempt basis, but I would need to know all of the arrangements in advance. And if you didn't meet that, or if you wanted more flexibility, you could issue bonds on a taxable basis. We're really getting the cart before course in this discussion, but you could do it on a taxable basis, which you would likely have to pay more interest on those bonds. And that would give you some flexibility, you wouldn't have to comply with the same IRS rules. Does that make sense? So those are some issues that I'm seeing with where this discussion is going. Sorry, lawyers always put a damper on.
One point is, I'm talking about the new library, is not putting it in the parking building, it's a separate building by itself.
I got you, I just wanted to.
I understand that makes it what you do with the phone. We're not talking about putting it together. Everything I had discussions with was, if the library moves out to the, I really think it should, that's another issue. There will be a separate building out there that adds to that, you have new center, you have the library. And then, I think that will really help the growth. And another thing that's popped in my head, I think if they could get all this worked out and it does fit in, I know that they might have, I'm sure, private donations and stuff, and people can talk, and I've seen that in some other things. But my experience has been in some other projects, and that's not gonna go there, is that once the project is proven, yeah, it's going there, then those people who are kind of standing back that have the money, want to donate, they'll say, they didn't want to report, because they're not sure, if it's a go, they're gonna say, okay, now we're in. And they'll come in. Now, how much, I don't know, but that is something that everyone needs to think about, that this will generate private donations, for the round. There's money out there, okay, and I didn't want to run out there. I know things kind of a little bit nationwide, a little bit kind of not scary, but a little more. I really think though, it's just getting back into things, getting this thing straightened out. And I think everybody's just a little bit kind of hesitant on that part about private donations. But I really think that does, but it's got to work out like we're talking about is who's got what, and who runs what, and how's this gonna work.
And this would be, a question probably for Mr. Houston, but, the county has the authority to create an administrative board, so you certainly could create an administrative board and appoint citizens, to oversee the operations of the community center. That way the county would have, say, decision-making authority. Also, again, going back to the sales tax collections, it can be used to operate and maintain this building, but it can't be used, to pay the salaries of the 501c3. So there's limits inherently in the sales tax collections on what it can be used for. And one other point on the property, since the discussion of the county purchasing the property came up, if you were to finance that or together with this project, that would be the same as using the sales tax collections to buy it, and so you would not be able to use that property for library purposes because that's not a voted purpose approved by the voters. Does that make sense? Okay.
No, I'm good.
So,
Oh, you wanna go?
Yeah.
so you just an example, or the example I was mentioned earlier, if the county were to buy the property for $100,000, but they didn't use, they financed that in connection with the bonds and the building of the building. That's the same as using the sales tax collections to buy the property. It's a voting purpose, so you couldn't then use the property for library. Does that make sense?
So you're saying this the bond, unless the ordinance was written before they can do other things.
Yes, that's right.
Well, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. Very good, you said, forgive me.
He said that unless the ballot was written that way, so that the property.
So we could get the people to vote on that. But
It's possible, I have to look at it, yes.
Or the other options, keep it separate. The bonds, the loan is just for the building, and then they purchase the property
On their own,
separate.
yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Russo, Judge, the Quorum Court could create a sales tax commission, either under the guise of an advisory board or administrative board, depending on how much authority the Quorum Court wanted to give them. If it's an advisory board, of course, they would report back to you in the Quorum Court, and any final decisions about spending money, things along those lines, would be made either by you or by the Quorum Court via ordinance. Same thing with the administrative board. As far as the bond issue, if it was put on the ballot for a community service building and the bond issue on the ballot encompassed the library, okay? it could be a separate building, but it could be built all at once. And I'll give you an example, is when the jail was originally built, there was a couple different sets of plans that were developed for different sizes of the jail, and they went with the bigger ones, okay? So in the architectural design, if the county's gonna be on the hook for the bond, and keep in mind, there's gonna be two separate taxes here. One's gonna be for the debt service on the building itself, the other's gonna be for the operation and maintenance of the community center. Well, we already have a sales tax for the library. That's for the maintenance and operation of the library. They could theoretically, the buildings could be attached, but it would all be in one location. And this specific square footage would be paid for by the sales and use tax for the library. Then the balance, the sales and use tax, would be for the community center. But because we're gonna finance the whole bond package for this building, then, and that's just for the debt service, that could be done. And then that would just be an architectural thing, but the ballot language for the bond service would have to be specifically spelled out to make sure that all these purposes were included. And I think you would agree with me on the bond issue, that's relatively simple to do.
Yes,
Justice Reed.
I would just,
Go ahead, sir.
One correction, library doesn't have a sales tax, it has a millage, property tax. So that would have to be incorporated into the language of the referendum if it was going to change that.
No, it would, we're not gonna change that. It would stay the same, but that's strictly for the operation, the
Okay, so
millages.
whatever that entity is on that property, that 9.9 would go to that.
Correct. Only for the library.
Okay, yeah. Who's gonna write the referendum language for this project? This is sufficiently complicated. If you're hoping to get this on the ballot in November, that language needs to be in front of the court as soon as possible.
because the first question would be, is if, and I'm happy to move forward with that, it would be, is this something that the Quorum Court wants to proceed with, I guess?
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but the court's only decision is the language in the referendum. We don't make a decision on whether it goes to the public or not, do we?
Well, you do.
You do.
It's the language of the referendum that's the most important role that the court plays.
Well, that and the various details that are gonna have to be agreed upon in either a management contract or a lease. And some of that's gonna have to be worked out in advance before you commit to $14 million in bonds.
Who's gonna work that out?
That's y'all's job.
You see, this committee is not gonna work it out. One other point, and I'll be quiet. We ran into a bit of an issue when we built the jail because we passed a 0.25 operation and maintenance that was in effect a year before the jail was finished. So we need to be very, very careful about that point. But operational maintenance language.
Yes, you're exactly right, and that is something to bring to everyone's attention. So we can talk about a little bit about, what would happen if one question were to pass and one question were to fail. But if I could, if we're talking about, go back for a moment, if we're talking about a library purpose and a community center, that may end up being a separate question on the ballot. I would need to look and see if that could be combined in some way, or if it would have to be two questions. Yes, ma'am.
Well, yes, we don't have an election in November, so who's paying for the special election? But if we wait until the primary, we get
There is no
reimbursed.
primary next
Next year,
yes, you're right. Okay.
next year, we get paid, we would get reimbursed for the primary.
Correct, but I'm saying with the sunsetting in February 26th.
I'm sorry, I
Yes,
wasn't aware.
if the sheriff's office for operations or for the community center,
Gotcha.
will have to be a November special election and we'll flip the bill.
I was just checking.
Good job. This is more complicated than it's going to be settled at this forum.
10-4.
I would recommend, Judge, that you set a committee to evaluate this with legal counsel.
Mr. Hudson,
Is there any way that the library can be incorporated into the building or the community center Or does it have to be a standalone building, because it'd be a lot cheaper if it could be in the original building, because a building by itself is going to be a lot more money.
It's gonna depend upon how it's worded in the bond referendum. Because keep in mind, you got two different things going on. You've got the bond referendum to build a building, okay? The second part of that's going to be the millage rate for the operation of the library, and then the sales tax revenue for the operation of the community center. That has to be clearly delineated on how that's going to work, okay? And yes, that could be done in all the paperwork, but that's another logistical issue that would have to be worked out. In my experience, it'd be better if they were attached with separate entrance, because then it's easier to clearly define what's what, who's paying for what, and it's clearly spelled out.
Okay. Here's the plan for the community center, okay? What?
They're getting ready for something.
Okay, well, all I'm gonna add to it is that if you wanna add the library in that building, then you gotta come up with a whole new deal. And you're talking about, here we go again.
I don't think they're following.
That's a good point. They're the ones that do it.
Can I answer your question about the sales tax? What happens if the permanent tax, the quarter-cent operation and maintenance of the community center were to pass and a bond pass cent fails?
Not yet, I'll have to see the one.
Well, I can answer that question. So if that happens, traditionally speaking, a lot of counties pass sales taxes just like this for jail projects. Well, a lot of counties already have a jail in operation, so you can use that quarter cent if you pass the quarter cent and not the O&M, right? A lot of counties already have a jail that is operating, so you can use that. But in this case, there is no community center currently in the county right now, am I right? So if the quarter cent O&M tax were to pass and the bond tax were to fail, it would not be easy to get rid of it. You would have to have another election to repeal that tax. I just want to point that out.
Well, that's exactly what happened in 16. What was the year? O&M passed, bond didn't pass for the jail. Bond passed in November, but there was a period of time where O&M was collected and pots and pans?
Pots and pans.
So that's just a sensitivity that you need to be aware of.
Yes.
Judge, I talked to bond lawyers at one of your colleagues,
Yes.
and I said, well, what happens if the O&M tax passes and the other one doesn't? He said, I won't have it. I talked with our board at the time, I visited with community people, they said they wanted to vote to build it, but didn't want the quarter cent to maintain it. And they were confused as to why the O&M tax was first and the building tax was second. So I called our friend the clerk, not Miss Moffitt, and I said, any particular reason why it was that way on the ballot? She said, well, that's why it came in the mail. Oh. Then we passed it in November, things worked out.
Yes.
And, it's a great concern. It takes advertising and explaining to the public what the particular questions are. That's the only way I know to deal with something.
Judge, if I may. Sam, correct me if I'm wrong, but if we move forward with the bond to build the building, okay? And maybe someone from the financing company, what's our anticipated from the passage of the bond until construction begins and is completed? How long?
I looked to read, the engineers could.
Yeah, these folks, our architects and engineers are here and they can answer that question.
So how long from bond passage to two things, groundbreaking and building completion?
That answer to that question is very open-ended in terms of how big a facility is and whatever kind of obstacles comes in our way.
Sure.
But, if everything goes perfect, I would think a 6-month design period would be adequate for probably a facility this size. If we ran into some unforeseen problems, say we did soils in the area and found out that we had to do some additional work for that, and we had to restructure the budget to take care of, and I'm just throwing about
Sure.
things that could come up. So with the lack of it, for a project this size, that's planned as now with the lack of any unforeseen things that come up that we wouldn't know about, then I would think a 6 month period for this project. So we have other projects where the answer to that question is 2 years.
Right.
But for a project of this size, we've probably got a jump at,
Yeah, if I can,
in Mountain Home, we're doing a project right now that's maybe 2 years.
if I can add it to this, so the project of this magnitude. So we have 2 examples, like one similar to that is City of Harrison. City of Harrison just completed their community center with the Quorum. So that took around 18 months to finish. In the community and equity center in Mount Home, it's much larger projects. The site work needs 6 months to finish it, and it's a 2 years our target. We are pretty good. So maybe it can go to 2 years or 2.5 years.
And that's what I
That means
anticipate.
for the whole project.
Sure.
Not for the design. I was talking about design period.
Sure, no, I'm talking about for the whole project, design and everything, let's say 2 years.
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
yes.
So if we just put on the referendum to begin with, the bond issue, to get the building going, not the O&M, okay? If we put it on the bond issue and we incorporate the library, okay, either as an add-on inside the building or whatever, okay? We've got a millage rate to operate that library for operation and maintenance, which means driveway upkeep, some of the building upkeep that we're going to have to do to go with it for the operation of the library, okay? And we can use the money for that legally. Absolutely, because that building's there, we have to have it open, we're paying for the employees, we're doing all that, okay? In the meantime, as the building's being built, then we can address the OEM on a separate ballot for the county. And potentially you could have a couple bites at the apple if it was to fail.
And I'm sorry, I misunderstood the question. I was just thinking I thought you were asking me how much time do we have for design period before we.
Oh, no.
So Chuck, that's right on turning up, opening the facility from day one.
Yeah, I was thinking about that, you're gonna put all that
No,
up
I
in 6 months.
was misunderstanding. I thought he meant how long.
That's okay, I was like, wow, you guys are good.
I was thinking, how long do we need design time before we put it out?
So, Judge, if I may, one of the things with the current quorum court that we had discussed earlier was short-term, medium-term, and long-term goals and plans of the quorum court. And one of the things that I think the quorum court's going to have to decide and talk about is the retirement of the current debt service and the commitment for the new debt service, because in some respects, unless we have a massive amount of growth, is that's going to put the county on the hook for liability that could potentially jeopardize any long-term projects. So as part of this process, and going through this with the community center, and I realize they've been working on this for years, but this is something that I think the quorum court and the community center folks need to hash out, because if we became a different class county, it would obviously change our bond rate. But if we stay where we're at, we're going to be limited, and that's one of the things. The timing of this is going to be so that as the jail retires, this would be put into place. Okay, but long term, that's something debt-wise that we're going to have to look at. So I see a lot of attractive things that can make this happen, but the devil's in the details, and that some of this is what's going to have to be worked out. And unfortunately, or fortunately, the quorum court and the community center folks are going to have to hash this out. We're going to do lease, we're going to do maintenance contract. What about the debt service? What are the other plans of the county? I have no idea. But that's something that you all are going to have to discuss as part of this.
Which was you mentioned the project over in Mountain Home. How long did it take them from the time it passed, the tax passed, until they were able to break ground? How long did it take them to gather enough funds to be able to go forward?
Okay. So what you're talking about, the design period, like having the break, like start construction and start designing basically. Because we start designing as soon as the bond is closed and money is available, then we start the design. So it takes a little bit longer than normal, number one. Because bond pass, I think in the middle of the COVID period, and then in all the inflation in the next 2 years, we had to do back and forth with construction manager to basically design and value engineer, so we can build it, because the inflation was too much. It's like the project was, initially we thought we can do it for like 27 million. Then when we design it, like 60% design, and we get the estimate, the contractor's estimate, it becomes like a 40 million. So we have to go back to the design board to make sure that how can we accommodate and value engineer project, and we have done it for many different times. So then it takes a little bit, I think 6 months more. So it took like about a year to do the design instead of like 8 months or 6 months, 8 months. So I think it's about a year after we started the design, we broke the ground. And actually, from our experience, sometimes when we do that, we actually package the construction differently. Like say, okay, because we can do very quickly site development package. So we release the site development package and we start the construction. So we are way ahead of the game before we have the final building groundbreaking. So that's how the community center was 1 year behind, but now they almost catch up because we released the site package early. So the ground and everything is ready for start the building.
That's what you got us for.
Two questions for y'all, and this is for the financing side. From the passage of the referendum until we have all the financial documents signed in hand and we're good to go, on average, based upon your experience, how long has that been taking?
For the designer for the
Not you, the finance guy.
Financing. So, if the tax were to sunset, which is key in this particular case, if it sunsets, you're basically going to be levying a new tax, which would be about a 90-day window before you could have a new tax revenue rolling in. All that being said, if you pass it in November, use that as an example, you would be having a financing probably around April or May of next year, being closing on that financing. And what happens is, just for those that may remember, as your financing team, we will literally wire you the amount of the project funds into a bank account, and that bank account will begin to draw interest. If in fact, and that account can sit there, if you did the M&O tax, if you did a different direction, you could take the M&O tax monies that are there, you could pay down the bonds more quickly because you're not using them to run the facility out. There's a lot of different ways to structure this. But all in all, to answer your question, it would take probably about 3 to 4 months after that where we could actually close on it.
If I could add to that one thing, is that once that vote passes, and then you got the 90-day window before all the everything is, the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted. That doesn't stop us from starting that design.
Sure.
The day it passes.
So
we'll already be 90 days into the design process by the time he gets that work done.
here's my next question for the attorney.
I'm sorry, I'm sort of home.
Now, my next question is for the attorney.
Okay, thank you.
It's passed. The county decides, or the Quorum Court decides, or the community center decides, we want to go with a different engineering and construction firm.
I wouldn't have anything to do with that, so.
Well, because do we want to bid this?
Usually you have to bid, construction contract.
So what specifications are we going to use for the bidding process?
That's a mystification.
Can I answer your question?
No, I want to hear it from the lawyer.
That's not my area of expertise.
Okay.
So I've worked on dozens and dozens of projects like this. And our firm, we've taken it on ourselves as an our own business plan to a lot of faith in verbal commitments from our clients before we reach that point. We know that smaller communities, even bigger communities, just don't have a pot of money sitting there to do all the work we've done on planning and floor planning and cost estimates and all the work we've already done. We know you don't have a pile of money sitting there just to dole out to us to do that. So we put a lot of faith in the people we work with not to do that to us. There is absolutely nothing to protect us from a potential client deciding to go with another firm. You certainly have that option. We hope that doesn't happen.
What if you're not the low bidder?
Well, in terms of, it's state law, state and federal law, is that in terms of selecting professional services, you are not, as a government entity, like a municipality, a county, a state, you're not allowed to choose professional services like an attorney, an engineer, an architect, based on price.
Correct.
You have to choose what firm you want to use based on qualifications.
Up till now, we have not been your client.
I understand.
And we may decide,
Yes,
as our foreign court gets into this,
I can address that.
that we want to go with a different.
So what the law states, what you would be asked to do is to advertise for qualification statements from companies like us or other companies.
Sure.
We hope that we've got a lot of credentials. We've done many projects like this. And always the people we've worked with have gone ahead and chosen us to do the job based on our qualifications. And they know that they know us, they know we can do the job. That doesn't mean that they can't choose another firm. And well, that breaks my heart if that was to happen. But it could happen legally. But they will take the law states, and I know you know, the qualification statements for us, and your committee looks at everybody's qualifications and then chooses the term they want to work with. At that point, you sit down with that firm and you negotiate what the fee is going to be. If our fee is too high or you're not happy with that, you can cancel that and go to the second choice that you have of the people that responded to the qualification statement. But your initial choice of who you use has to be based on their qualifications. And the analogy I've always used for that is, let's say you had to have multiple open heart surgery. Do you want to pick the one that's the cheapest, or do you want to pick the one you think's the best?
Well, the problem is, in previous years, in dealing with construction and management companies, the research was, in my opinion, wasn't done properly, and that was before my time. And now that I've been plugged in this role, I think that this foreign court and the community wants to make sure that I cross the T's and dot the I's as far as this county is concerned. And that's the only thing I wanted you to say. And I want everybody.
The construction manager and us are two different animals.
Sure.
And
But hiring you for your professional services, when we hire you, if we hire you for your professional services, we expect whoever our construction manager is going to be partially based upon your professional recommendation.
Absolutely.
And that's crucial and critical,
Yes.
because that has not always happened where the right questions were not asked in the past.
Yeah.
That I want to make sure that everybody's fully aware of what the extent of the relationship is going to be between all parties involved.
Absolutely. And we would work with our client to help them pick the construction manager.
Sure.
And we've had situations where, unfortunately, in a municipality, the county wanted to hire one, we weren't too happy about it. And so, but we would be there as an advisor in that position.
Sure.
To help the county choose the right construction manager for their project, give them input on ones we've worked with before or have not worked with before, and the success of the project. So we could only act as an advisor capacity, but we certainly would be there to do it, and have done it several occasions.
Thank you.
So
I've got one more question here, and then we'll get to the presentation.
Since we're pretty much out of time, when would we expect a draft of the recommended?
I can get started on it as soon as I get a green light.
What-
So
Who are you waiting for a green light for?
The county is my, you know, you guys are my client, so
We've got no money appropriated for that.
so I would, if you were to move forward with the project, the community center, bonds, and the O&M tax, then I would work on a contingent basis, and my fee would not, you wouldn't owe me anything until the bonds are issued.
Same thing for us.
I'm not sure what part is at this time. I understand our part is, we're not.
Can I say something then?
Sure.
I want to say something.
Go for it.
Everything that they said is basically, it's true. I mean, what they're talking. But the Quorum Court's primary decision is to decide if we're gonna vote to have a community center built. If it's gonna be put on the ballot, that's what you need to vote on. If you're gonna vote to allow the sheriff's office to have 1.5 cent sales tax to operate on from here on out, you're gonna have to decide to vote on that. If you decide to vote on both of them, which I don't think we can afford, then you're gonna lump them together. You'll have 3 different ordinances or 3 different voting items that'll be on the ballot. And you're gonna have 2 cents, 2 cent sales tax, 2.5 cent sales tax that we're gonna be levying on the county.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean,
How does the court make a decision when we don't have the language in front of us?
y'all will have to decide which road you want to travel.
Well, conceptually, that's easy to do.
Well,
we can make a conceptual decision, what are we committing to?
Well, you're committing to $14 million building.
Now, first off, we're committing to paying her for language.
If I could walk you through what I foresee as the process, you know, normally, typically, I don't come before you without an ordinance ready to present, but I would like to have some direction on what you want, you know, what you want to move forward with. So, you know, if you would like me to, you know, prepare 3 different, you know, options where you're, you know, where you've got the judge said, I would just like to know. So if in the event, what I would suggest is that you come back at your May meeting with ordinances, election ordinances, ready to adopt. What you want on those election ordinances, that's what I would like to walk away from this conversation. But it's up to you.
I don't think you're gonna get it from this conversation. That's a little bit more detailed, but I think we're prepared to make a decision on.
Yeah.
Also, you know, my ideal of recommending language was, you know, we want some money. What do you think, public? And that's it. Yeah, I figured it'd be a little bit longer than that. So.
Yeah.
But I believe we've had a good question and answer back and forth. Nothing will be decided this evening, so we can just have a presentation, correct?
Oh,
Yes.
okay. My name's Barry Carr, and I'm Vice President in charge of marketing. And my role is involved in the planning, helping communities like this sort of decide what they're going to build based on citizen input and how that's going to go. And I started this job, I told you how old I am, in September of 1980. So I got 45 years of doing this. And dozens and dozens and dozens of communities that I've worked with that I'm happy to share their experiences and how these kinds of projects have worked in their communities and whether they've been successful or not. And speaking for the Army of Blue, a couple of things that have come up in the discussion I'd like to address before I get too far into this meeting was a point well made by the sheriff that y'all have this need for additional operation and maintenance of the jail and your facilities, and that's well taken. And this group really has been working for years and years and years on bringing a community center and facilities for the county, for people in the county to use. If I could just use one example, We did a community center and indoor pool and new baseball complex for the city of Bryant, Arkansas, 12 years ago. At the exact same time, the fire department was needing money for a new fire station, new equipment, new trucks, etc. And just similar to this community, there was concern that that community just wouldn't feel like they could raise enough tax revenue to support both facilities. But the municipality decided to put both of them on the ballot and let them see what happens. And everybody was concerned, oh, this one won't get passed or because of the other one might get passed and all that kind of thing. And so there was some consternation between the two groups. Whose is going to pass? Lo and behold, both of them passed. So the point I'm trying to make is that in their case, yeah, it was a little bit of a higher tax revenue than everybody wanted the county to do, or the city to do. But they put it out to the voters to let the voters decide if they wanted to tax themselves to that level. And in that case, both facilities got built, both of them are beautiful, and both of them are paid for. So, yes, sir.
What county in Bryan, Arkansas?
I'm sorry.
What county?
Saline.
That was for the
Saline.
city, the municipality of Bryant,
Okay.
city of Bryant, Arkansas.
What class county is that?
So anyway, all my point is on that issue.
Yeah, good question.
That as far as this group's concerned, I think that nobody wants this to be, you can't have that because we want this, you know, I mean, I think this is what let your community decide. That's enough of that said. But I'll be happy to answer any questions you have about other facilities we've worked on or either other companies we've worked on that I know about how they help their communities. So we went one slide past. I'd just like to introduce my group. I'm Eric Carr. This is Dr. Shawkat Ali. He has a funny name and talks funny because he's originally from Bangladesh. We want all that means. So then over here is Carl Minihart. Carl's our senior architect. He's been the lead architect in all these community centers we've done everywhere else. Will Andrews, I call him our pool boy. He is a pool designer deluxe. Will has designed well over 50% of the publicly owned recreational water projects that have been built in Arkansas in the last 20 years. No question about it. So Will really knows his subject on that. So anyway, we've been working with your committee for well over 3 years now to come up with a floor plan and design that I think most of y'all have seen that fits what we think, what we've advised them. We think that a community this size of this county would need, and then took their input and what they wanted. And then we talked to the bankers to see how much money that we could, what budget we could design to, and came up with a floor plan that you've seen. So that's sort of the role that we took, was to come up with a project that these people that have been working on this most of their lives now could present to you to ask for your permission to put it on the ballot. So I'll just go through the screen if they want to go to the next one. What you see there is the side plan that we've come up with on that property. And you see we've got parking, of course, on both sides. The
Saline County.
that dotted looking area around it is the walking and bicycle area, so that we get people outdoor recreation. There's also a little outdoor pavilion plan around the pond existing. That's really good. The pond would also be a retention pond just for environmental and civil issues. And then you see your main building. If you want to go to whoever's doing it, here's your floor plan for the building. You can see as you enter on the left, you've got, the men's and women's restrooms. We have a women's aerobics room. That's what we call it. It's an area for groups to get together and do workouts and jazzercise and those types of things. Right next to that is a children's room and a teenager's room. The thought being that we put facilities in there to reach those age groups so that when mom and dad are in there working out, the kids will be right next to them. So then you move to the right and you see a banquet hall with a stage where you can hold all kinds of special events. So it's also got its dressing room and meeting room and its own restroom facility. So at the top, you're seeing a basketball court, which speaks for itself. We use also for volleyball and all kinds of different activities. with its own standalone restrooms and et cetera. The, also has an elevated walking track. And in my experience, the two things that get the most use of these facilities are the therapy pool and the walking track. The seniors use these things like crazy, and they're always busy. So when I visit facilities that we've worked on, that's where I always, if I go there Tuesday at 9 o'clock in the morning, that facility is always being used as those walking tracks. And also the therapy pool. And down below is a lap swimming pool with 6 lanes and a therapy pool, very large therapy pool, which is a tremendous facility for communities, especially for the seniors in the community to use. And I've got stories I can tell all day about the success of those type of facilities and how they've helped out the community. And then above that, you've got a play pool area for play features and slides and little things like that. And it takes the place of what we used to call kiddie pools. You know, it's 0 depth, almost no depth, you know, for the children to play in. It's splash pad kind of facility. So that's sort of the interior of the building, although there's other amenities like concessions and that type of thing. So this is just an artist rendering of what the outside of the building might look like. We try to use local materials, both to fit into your community, make it look like it fits into this community, as well as keep the price down. So, and you guys feel free to interrupt me anytime when I say something wrong, it's not correct. So, but anyway, these are just initial artist renderings of what the facility look like. As we get further into design, if the bond issue is to pass, we could change this 1,000,000 times to meet your committees and to make sure that it was exactly what you wanted. That's just another outside view of the facility to show that little pond and how we've incorporated it into the project with some pavilions and the walking areas around it. We built these facilities where we've added on little piers and they started having youth fishing derbies where you stop and get they always get Game and Fish Commission to stop them with national fishing derbies and things like that. Oh, let me address one more thing before I forget. When we originally started the plan for this site, for the site plan, the committee had asked us to just show where a library would sit on the facility. And so we originally had that on there as its own standalone building, not incorporated into this floor plan. So if it was decided that we wanted to add that into the facility and raise the additional funds for library, we just simply put that back in there, or like Mr. Johnson suggested, put it inside that building. Either direction we decided to go. So that's just an artist rendering of the reception area. We're going to change that picture to that. Okay, it's a cool business. That's nothing but just an artist rendering of what the inside of the building might look like when you go inside. So, okay. This is a list of the facility use, just things that we've added in there that came from your organization to show you the types of things that the facility could be used for. So, certainly, continuing to work with your local education, your local school district, to have open school and summer programs there. No telling what all that could include, and has included in a lot of facilities we've worked on. In the pool area, certainly swimming lessons, swim teams, water aerobics, pool parties, lots of parties. We like to design all of our facilities knowing that you've got an operation maintenance cost, but we want to design a facility that you can keep busy and crowded at all times. And that helps you create revenue for the facility. So if you have multiple opportunities for party rooms, for them to rent them out for birthday parties or swim team parties or church Sunday school class parties at the swimming pool, whatever, you're able to rent these facilities out, and that helps augment your operation and maintenance costs and your staffing costs. Certainly meeting rooms and business rooms, banquets, and all those types of issues. So there's just a myriad. There's dozens and dozens and dozens of programs that these facilities are used for everywhere else, and y'all are used here. So that's just advertising. Facility use, fitness, and leisure all in one, which these projects have been extremely successful everywhere we've worked. We got a letter just last week from the mayor of Harrison on their project that just opened, telling how successful their project has been. And one gentleman here today told me that he saw some news, and this is not uncommon, that they had planned on having 1,000 members when they opened. And that after opening, they came out with 3,500 members. And so that's I don't know if y'all ever been to Batesville. We did one in Batesville. The exact same story. And they draw people from the other counties and the other cities around them. We did a project at Danville, Arkansas. Danville is just a little bit over 2,000 people. They're 20 minutes away from Dardanelle and Russellville, which are much, much bigger communities. All they built was an outdoor pool with a little indoor area for parties and things like that. They're sold out every day. Everybody in that county goes to that pool. There are people coming into Danville like you wouldn't believe, shopping in their stores, eating at their restaurants. And the mayor told me that they've even got people from Dardanelle and Russellville, which have their own facilities, coming there because they like it that it's smaller. They like it that it's more homey. I would like to point out one more thing. This poor little child fell asleep a long time ago. So we're way too long in this presentation. So anyway, but I could just talk about these facilities all day. Obviously, I love them, and I'm very passionate about it. It's something that I love doing during my career and watching the way it's transformed the communities that we work with and how many friends and people I've gotten to know in those communities over the years. And it's just been a wonderful project. So speaking as a spokesperson for this group, I know they'd love to see y'all go forward with it. I know y'all got a lot of decisions to make. So that's pretty much my presentation, and I'd love to answer any questions if you have any. Okay.
I would like to make one comment.
Okay.
The city of Bryant, just so you know, that supported both sides, it's a Class 6 county. It's right next to Little Rock. It's in Saline County, Arkansas. It's a huge county.
It is very true.
And we're a Class 2.
Yes, that's all there is.
Say it again.
I have a question for Mr. Russo.
Russo. Justice Van Dyken's got a question.
Say this.
Well, thank you guys for listening to me. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
Say that both issues go to the ballot at the same time. It should be November, correct? And what if they fail? When can either or one or the other be resubmitted?
The following year.
So it's a year later for cost and everything.
But if they fail, money that has sunsets, got a whole new ballgame. All right?
If you decide to move forward, my recommendation would be to do the sheriff's half cent and to do the bond issue for the building. Don't worry about the O&M right now for the community center. You can pass that later because let's just say the bond issue passes, okay? It's going to be 2 years before that building's built. You're not going to need the O&M money until the building gets ready to open. Let's just say, for argument's sake, they're ahead of schedule, okay? And the O&M for the facility hasn't materialized. If you've combined the library into it, the library's got a steady stream of income and a lot of money that could assist in keeping the driveways, the water, the sewer, all that going until the O&M came into play for the community center.
That's a library board decision.
That is a library board decision, but it's based upon approval from the Quorum Court for appropriations.
Yes, sir.
My question goes along with this. What if that,
If the bond issue fails,
if your suggestion, what if that fails?
then you're gonna have to put it on the ballot following year.
But if you don't have the O&M already there, then the county has the issue of dealing with the maintenance and finance of that, which you haven't
No.
got that yet.
No, the O&M is not, you're not gonna need it until the building's built.
correct, but what if that does not pass, even if the building is built, which you're proposing doesn't pass? Doesn't that leave risk for the county?
It does leave risk for the county, because then they have to look at appropriating money, either through general funds or other funding source, such as the community center, if they're operating the facility, donations, the fees for the use of the facility, taxes, things along those lines.
Would it be in the best interest to just do it all at the same time?
No, because what happens if the bond issue fails and the O&M passes? Now what?
Can you put O&M contingent to completion of the project?
You can only do it to the extinguishment. The only thing you're gonna be able to use the O&M for is if the bond passed.
In the referendum language, could you make O&M contingent so that you pass it, but it's not going to be used until?
Here's the way you have to word it. Here's the way you have to word it.
No, you cannot make it contingent. They're separate.
Here's,
But you could have a delayed effective date. You could do something like that.
But you'd have to know first, we'd have to depend on these folks to tell us a delayed effective date.
so what,
You
here's,
can only go out, yeah, there's a limit, there's a statutory limit on how far out you can go. But you cannot make, the taxes cannot be contingent on each other.
she's correct. What you have to do is, just like the sunset clauses, you would have to put a time limit if the bond failed. Okay? That's why I think if you were just going to do the O&M and the bond, I'd say put them on at the same time. Okay? But if you're gonna put the sheriff's on there and the community center O&M and the bond, you all know this community better than I do. Do you really think that's gonna pass? So if you want the community center to move forward and you want law enforcement to be paid, I think you stand a better chance of getting the bond issue passed and law enforcement paid. That's just my recommendation. It's up to y'all to decide.
If both pass, that's an increase in tax.
Yes.
How do you tell the public that?
That's,
I mean, that may not be real clear.
that's part of what this is all about. Yes, sir.
Sure. Another example.
Behind you, sir.
I just not thought of is, oh, I'm sorry.
What you would have is the sales tax for the bond issue and the sales tax for the sheriff's office.
But we're already paying the sales tax for bond issue. The
Yeah,
only additional
would be the sheriff.
would be the sheriff.
So how much is it, what's the bottom line on if you're a taxpayer?
If you're a taxpayer and all the proposals pass, a half cent for the O&M of jail and law enforcement purposes, a half cent for bonds, and a quarter cent for O&M, that's an additional 3/4 cent.
Because the 1/2 cent is already being paid.
Correct.
Right. So just a 3/4 cent. Correct.
Yeah, it would be a 3/4 cent.
But when, in my experience, in dealing with taxes, good luck trying to get all three taxes at the same time.
Worst case scenario, charge, letting people like the chances are it's going to pass.
So-
If the facility actually can go, it's more likely.
So, and if the facility's built, or being built, and yes, you would have limited operation if the library goes in there, because the library could pick up some costs. Just have to be careful of how that parse out, okay? But in Newton County, a few years ago, when they built the jail, the bond issue passed, but the O&M failed. So they're able to build this nice new jail and had no money to staff or run it, okay? We'd be in a little different situation here if the library was tied in, number one, and number two, with the county being behind this and having a management or lease contract with the community center, you could begin generating some revenue. You might be limited on what you're able to do if your O&M doesn't pass, but with a new building, you at least be able to get going.
I would tell you that, Mr. Russo.
Ah.
I would tell you that we worked on the budget for months, and I can tell you, the quarter cent is absolutely critical to the survival of the center.
Sure. The thing about it is, and Marie, I think you agree, if the building, a lot of people are gonna be like, well, until this thing's built, unless something happens, you know, but once the building's built, and if it's at least partially operational with the library in there and going, then I think that's gonna be an easier sale to the public than trying to do everything in one shot. And I don't want it to fail. You know what I'm saying? If you're gonna put this on the ballot and you're gonna vote for it, I think your best opportunity is, because everybody wants to support the sheriff, I'm sure. They want good law enforcement on the flip side of the coin. If the bond issue passes, and it doesn't sunset, and it's not, and the word gets out, and it's not gonna cost them anymore, then the likelihood this thing's gonna move forward, I think it's much greater.
So you are talking about the community center going on the current construction document.
Yes,
And the sheriff's office would be a set.
correct. So you have two things that would go before the voters on the referendum. But that's, the Quorum Court's gonna have to decide on that, and that's where y'all are gonna have to talk. That would be my recommendation to them.
Justice Reed.
We're hearing a lot of supposition and we're hearing a lot of this and that.
Yes.
This is not the forum to make a decision. Let's table this and put together a committee that you're calling to make decisions, not just hear supposition.
We had a good conversation tonight, moving forward. I appreciate everyone coming out. If there's nothing left, I will,
Judge, if I may,
yes, sir,
if you're going to have a committee,
if I choose to, yes.
if you choose to have the committee, but here's what I'm gonna tell you. This ain't my job.
Yeah.
That's her job.
Mhm.
So you all are gonna have to decide at some point in time if you're gonna move forward.
I think we'll have a procedures management committee, and we'll discuss and move forward from there and keep things going.
I would keep her in the loop.
Yeah.
Okay.
I entertain a motion.
Motion.
Thank you all very much. Exactly.